Hello and welcome to the Jesuit Missions podcast. Today we've got an election special episode. We spoke to Victoria Firth from the Jesuit Refugee Service UK to talk about what we'd like to see from a new government following the UK general election on July the 4th.
Thanks ever so much, Victoria, for joining us. Just to open up, I wonder whether you could tell us what JRS UK have been doing in the run-up to the general election.
Yes. Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me. So welcoming the stranger is at the heart of Catholic social teaching. And in the run-up to the general election, as ever, we at the Jesuit Refugee Service UK are calling for a fairer, more humane asylum system. This is something we've been advocating for refugee friends for a long time. But for the election, we've put this call into three main asks for people to talk to their candidates about. So our first ask is to repeal the anti-refugee laws, such as the Illegal Migration Act or the Rwanda Plan, for example, and to redesign our asylum system so that it considers asylum claims fairly, ensuring that people have their case for sanctuary heard. Our second ask is for an end to immigration detention. And our third ask is the right to work for people seeking asylum. And if anyone listening would like to find out more, you can find more details at jrsuk.net/election. Cheeky little plug there. So on our webpage, we have shared talking points for people to discuss our three main asks with local candidates or even with family and friends. Here in the UK, we've experienced years and years of increasingly dehumanising language and hostile policies towards refugees. So what we're hoping for with our election resources is that our prompts are useful to people when they are in conversation with others. This election is a chance to make it clear to candidates that we want a system which helps those who come here seeking safety. Our asks would support people seeking sanctuary to live in dignity and flourish. And I think that these changes would also help build stronger communities here in the UK and make a real contribution to the common good. So, in brief, our key asks and the key priorities I think the government should consider. First, repealing the anti-refugee laws and building a system that considers asylum claims fairly. Unfortunately, the asylum system we have right now bans the majority of people from even having their asylum claims heard. What we want to see is that people have the legal support they need to navigate the process, that they're treated as human beings, human beings seeking sanctuary. Our second ask, an end to immigration detention. We're the only country in Europe where there is no time limit on how long someone can be detained for, and that decision never goes before a judge. Immigration detention violates human dignity, and there are other effective options for supporting people through the asylum process in communities. And lastly, lifting the ban on work. Everyone wants the opportunity to participate in society, and we all find fulfillment in being able to use our gifts. Here in the UK, asylum seekers cannot work until they have been waiting for a decision on their asylum claim for over 12 months, and even then they have to apply for permission to work in jobs from a highly restrictive list. For most, this is a total ban on employment. There is a strong public support for the right to work, and most people seeking asylum want to work so that they can contribute to and participate in society, support themselves and their families.
Well, that sounds like you've got a lot of clear things there for a new government to consider when they come in. I think obviously for us at Jesuit Missions as an international development organisation, obviously we're looking internationally a lot of time, but then I think there can be a link between that and migration and refugees. A couple of things that we're asking for is an incoming government to provide greater aid to low income nations. And also to cancel any unsustainable debts that they've held. So, can this impact on the sort of work that you do? Is there any sort of link there?
Yeah, loads. There are loads of connections. Pope Francis, in his message for World Day of Migrants and Refugees last year, it's 2023, is very clear that we need to focus on eliminating the causes of involuntary forced migration, so the reasons that force people to flee as refugees in the first place, and lots of that obviously is aligned with what you do, as well as welcoming them with love when they come here seeking safety. So I think, they're totally joined up. Providing greater aid to low-income countries could be one way of combating forced involuntary migration. Aid can tackle the root causes of poverty and injustice in people's home countries. And you're the experts on that, so I won't speak too much to that. The cancelling of debts can likewise make a big difference to conditions of a country. Many developing countries do have large and unsustainable debts. In Sri Lanka in 2020, for example, I think it's like 70% of all government spending was on debt repayment, and hence its collapse later. So high debt repayments can hugely reduce a government's ability to provide key services such as education or healthcare. And of course, this can all contribute to reasons why people might leave. Academics, I think, are still debating exactly what effect aid or the cancelling of debts has on migration. Both aid and debt forgiveness increase people's agency. This is a great thing, right? Especially from the perspective of our two charities with our Jesuit identities. So it's a great thing. But agency can also be used in multiple ways. People migrate when they have both the aspiration and the capability to migrate. So lots of people who benefit from increased aid or better living conditions might not want to migrate. They'll be happy to stay where they are with their family and friends in a place where they know and they've grown up, but they can do so in better conditions. They won't be forced to move. So this might be due to better health and social care, new dignified work opportunities, and so on. Some people, however, might still want to migrate, and this might always happen. And increased aid could also increase people's capability to migrate. But the key thing is it would be voluntary and it wouldn't be forced. People wouldn't be forced to flee their homes. Aid can and does also support people in times of forced displacement, whether they've been forced to flee to neighbouring countries or to move within their own country. And again, just a reminder, the vast majority of people who have been displaced are internally displaced within their origin countries. I think the latest UNHCR Global Trends report shows that 69% of refugees are hosted in neighbouring countries to where they're originally from, and that low to middle income countries host 75% of the world's refugees. We hear this narrative in the UK a lot, that all refugees are coming here, and that's just not the case. I think refugees and asylum seekers make up 0.6% of the total population in the UK, so that's a tiny fraction of refugees globally. JRS works in over 50 countries around the world, and our work in each country is informed by needs that aren't being met locally. So we work in a mixture of refugee camps, war zones, and urban settings. The Jesuit Refugee Service is present in many neighbouring countries, and maybe many of the countries where Jesuit Missions is also doing great international development work. We're present in places like Lebanon, Syria, South Sudan, all of which have lots of refugees. So aid allows those who have had to move and who are often in very vulnerable circumstances to be supported while on their search for safety. So yes, I think you're asked to increase aid, and the quality of that aid to low-income countries is, really important. I've loved the work that I've seen on your webpage. A few years ago, the UK's aid budget was cut from 0.7% of gross national income to 0.5%, and a significant amount of that remaining aid budget in recent years has been actually spent here in the UK on hosting refugees in out-of-town hotels. This is not only costly, but also keeps people seeking to rebuild their lives from establishing support networks and relationships within communities. We at JRS UK prefer community housing models. Money being spent on placing people in hotels and out-of-town settings is bad for refugees. I want to stress that we don't see aid to low-income countries and welcoming refugees as competing goals. Like I said, I think they're very much part of one project. Instead, with better decision-making and policies, with money used more effectively, we can make more progress towards both. I'll quote Pope Francis from last year's World Day of Migrants and Refugees message again. He said, "Even as we work to ensure that in every case, migration is the fruit of a free decision, we are called to show maximum respect for the dignity of each migrant. This entails accompanying and managing waves of migration as best we can, constructing bridges and not walls, expanding channels for a safe and regular migration." A common question or response I get when I'm out talking to people is, why can't we help people where they are instead of here? We absolutely need to help people where they are, whether that's by providing more aid, forgiving debt, tackling climate change. But this also takes time. And in the meantime, while we work for change, Pope Francis calls this a long process. So while we work for an end to forced migration, we must realise that our sisters and brothers are still being forced to move. And so we must continue to respond with love, affirming their human dignity and want for safety.
Yeah, very, very much so. I think that's all great stuff. And you referenced some of the countries where JRS International is working. And of course, Jesuit Missions, as part of the Xavier network, supports JRS International through that. And, recently we've had examples in Syria and Turkey after the earthquake there, and of course Ukraine, helping refugees in neighbouring countries there. I think one of the things that people see when they see migrants, and they're often fleeing from war or natural disasters, like those two examples there. Why is it important that any new government still takes that into consideration, when they take office?
Well, something that we're always calling for is for safe and legal routes. Because, lots of things are happening in the world today. Sometimes I find it actually quite hard to watch the news and hear about more stuff going on. But I think showing solidarity is really important. It's a way of affirming the human dignity of our sisters and brothers across the world. It's a way of showing up, of kind of taking on that global responsibility. Pope Francis talks a lot about how nations have a shared responsibility to respond to these things. So it shouldn't fall to any one nation. And we probably need lots of cooperation. I think Enver Solomon at the Refugee Council also talks a lot about how any really meaningful response to taking in people, to helping with issues going on across the world, can't rely on any one nation. We need to all do it together. Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that people would like to see, that compassion, from any politician, to show that actually they are thinking about these things. But then, of course, put practical measures in place where possible.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes I go and talk to people and they think that I'm saying an open border system. And no, that's not the case. If we're taking it from a church perspective, while the church is really clear that we need to welcome people, love the stranger and so on, that the church is also really clear that countries have the right to govern its own borders. So we're not saying no asylum system, we're just saying that things can be done better. Yeah.
I mean, immigration to this country, of course, has been a big feature of campaigning. Something that we've all seen. I wonder. I mean, you've obviously touched on a lot of points of what you'd like to see, but on this issue particularly, is there anything else that you as from a JRS perspective that you'd like to get across? I think there's a lot of people can be demonised often. Migrants coming here, but it's not as black and white as that. So I just wonder if there was anything else that you would like to see from any new government coming in.
Yeah. I'm hoping there will be an end to the bad faith rhetoric around migration. Migration will always be political, but with this election, with recent years, it's clearly become excessively politicised in the most unpleasant and unhelpful way. My colleague, Dr. Sophie Cartwright, who is the Senior Policy Officer at JRS, recently published a blog on our website reflecting on one of the debates last week, where candidates outright recognise that people coming here are in genuine need of safety, coming here from countries like Iran, Syria, Afghanistan. But instead, the candidates spoke of asylum seekers as just a logistical problem to be solved, so without any of that compassion. We seem to have become caught in this race to the bottom and who can be tougher on immigration. But instead, what I'm really hoping that the new government will do is to remember that it is people who are coming here seeking safety. All of us want a safe place to call home with community and support. And if we ever had to move, we would want to be treated fairly and have the opportunity to rebuild our lives, wouldn't we? Welcoming people can present many wonderful opportunities for us. Migrants have many skills and talents and values that can contribute to and be fruitful in our society. So I hope that the new government are able to see that every person who leaves their home to build their life here is just that, a person made in the image of God with a name and a story. And I think we need to be working with people with lived experience of the asylum system to do better.
Yeah. Well, they're going to be in the best position to do it because they've seen how it works, how it doesn't work, and how we can go from there. One of the things that we're really focusing on at JM is this idea of the climate crisis that we've got, and of course that is linked to migration as well. There's a lot of climate migration, particularly in the global south and the countries that we both work with. And it seems as if it's only going to get worse. I think this is something you've quoted Pope Francis a couple of times, and he's been pretty clear on this, that if we don't do something, it's only going to get worse. Again, looking ahead to a new government, what could they do to sort of address this? I guess that's sort of two questions. One, how could they address the environment and the climate crisis, and also the impact that has on migration? And just following on from that, how can we all get involved as well? It's of course, politicians have a huge responsibility, but we all do. So I wonder whether you had any thoughts about what they could do, what we could do, what we could all do together.
Yeah. So I think that the term climate migration or the term climate refugee is a term that researchers are still trying to work out the use of, especially as it kind of gets bandied about by politicians and the media, so on. So climate migration or climate refugee can suggest that people are moving just because of climate change, but we all know that instead migration is complex and happens for many different reasons simultaneously, right? There's lots of uncertainty about how climate change will affect migration. Some academics think that climate change will not drive enormous waves of migration like we hear in the news. There's a really interesting episode on the BBC podcast, More or Less, which is about this. Climate shocks are likely to, for some people, make migration actually a lot less accessible because it threatens people's livelihoods. To migrate, you both need the aspiration and the means, right? So some people might be involuntarily immobile, unable to move. Or in some cases where migration does happen, where people are forced to move, it might be internal within the same country or within the same region. The real exception is for those who inhabit small island states, which may indeed be submerged in this century because of climate change and will require international settlement. But of course, climate change isn't working on its own. Climate change can exacerbate local conflicts and injustices, or even on the flip side, poor governance and inequality can lead to poor environmental decisions and contribute to climate change, and thus become factors forcing people to move. So what can a new government do? It can reduce the UK's carbon emissions. It can provide aid to assist countries in supporting the most vulnerable communities, especially those most exposed to climate shocks, people whose livelihoods will be affected. And it can reduce or forgive unsustainable debt to increase the global South's ability to respond to climate change and climate shocks, because this is all very costly, isn't it? It could also consider opportunities for labour pathways and remittances. As to what society can do, I'd say try to look for ways to introduce sustainability into our day-to-day lives. And we should be advocating for greater change. We're here in one of the richest countries in the world. There's a lot of talk about shutting borders, but a lot less about how we can stop people being displaced in the first place or about combating climate change. So I think things that you do, calling for greater aid, for debt forgiveness, for safe and legal routes, an end to the hostile environment, for better responses to climate change, it's part of the way we can be in solidarity with others across the world. And of course, all of this, especially responding to climate change and trying to be more sustainable, is something which is a key thing for the Jesuits, right? It's a huge priority. So it's something we're always trying to improve on at JRS.
Yes, and it's very much the case. It's a big part of our work, and I think for you guys as well, and as you say, the Jesuits in this country and across the world. So and it's often the people who are in these poorer countries and in a more vulnerable position who've done the least to actually cause the issues with the climate. Yeah. It's countries like us and those in the global north. So we do have a responsibility to look to address it. I think another thing that has been a theme in the run-up to this election is how Catholics and also people, all people of faith, how they can use their core beliefs and what they read, what they learn about from their faith to engage in this election. But I think it's something that you can think about for wider elections and the society in general. How do you think that people of faith could go about using these sort of things to get involved in elections?
Yeah. I think we're super lucky in that there's this wealth of knowledge across the church, across lots of denominations about social justice issues and key issues that lots of people are thinking about in the run-up to the election, no matter what religion you are. So I'd say I really hope that people of faith will take the time to read what each party is committing to. And as you do, think about how what they're pledging to aligns with principles of human dignity, of solidarity, care of creation, the common good. And I think just taking the time to read things for yourself and not just relying on what you're hearing on the news actually makes a big difference. Also, in terms of engaging with the election, this isn't all about policy. Everything we do, whether it's in our parishes, in our social circles, and in our daily life, we can reach out to that hand of friendship to love the stranger and those abroad by the conversations we have, by the interactions we have with people. So as Catholics, as Christians, as people of faith, we're called to be witnesses to a better world, aren't we? So as the election draws close, a key way, I think, to engage with the election is to talk to others about the importance of voting and what different parties are committing to, about the changes you'd like to see, about the things that you think we should be advocating for. And of course, it's really important people use their democratic right to vote. Voting is a clear way of showing that we want to see change. Many of us want a different change to refugees and asylum seekers, to climate change, to international aid, to addressing poverty, to a whole range of social justice issues. So voting is a way to make that want for a different way, a different approach, very clear.
Yeah, I think we've been very clear on that you should vote whatever you're going to do, even if you just at least go to the ballot box or do a postal vote, proxy vote, whatever. But at least exercise that right if you are able to. That's fantastic, Victoria. I just wondered whether there was anything else that you would like to add that we haven't touched on. No worries if not. I'd just like to, at the end, give the opportunity if there was something that we may have missed. But yeah, I don't know if there was anything else that or if you think we've covered it.
I think that's everything, yeah.
And you mentioned where we can find JRS's materials. Is that, do you have any social media handles, Gail, that you want to put through?
So if you'd like to follow us on Facebook, you can just search Jesuit Refugee Service UK. On Twitter, we're at JRS UK. And on Instagram, we are at JRS UK with a little underscore at the end, JRS UK underscore. But you can also find all this information about where to follow us on social media or any information about our work at www.jrsuk.net.
That's fantastic. Hopefully lots of people will head there and see all the great stuff you've been doing. I'll just add our bits on as well, make it clear that we're not competing. We work together, just in different ways. But if you want to find out more about Jesuit Missions and the work that we do, then it's jesuitmissions.org.uk. It's our website. You can find our general election resources there. And similarly to, as Victoria said, that all the details about our social media handles. But it's Jesuit Missions UK is the best place to search. Thank you very much, Victoria. It was lovely speaking to you today and finding out about all the plans you've got and ideas you've got for the upcoming election. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens on Thursday and beyond. And we'll see what happens over the next few years.
Thank you very much, Adam.